Let's get straight to the point. What you did last night wasn't just a meeting. It was something more. Something that left a mark. A sensation you can't shake off because even though you try to convince yourself that it was just a moment, that it meant nothing, deep down in your mind there is something telling you otherwise. And it's not about morality. It's not because society says you should feel a certain way. It's because your own psychology is playing tricks on you. The human brain is not designed for detachment. You can try to rationalize. You can try to pretend that no emotions are involved. Here is the brutal reality. Every time you're intimate with someone, there's a connection that goes beyond the physical. Maybe right now you don't realize it. Maybe you feel indifferent. Sure, you're one of those who can separate pleasure from feeling. But what happens when days later, their scent lingers on your skin? When their voice echoes in your head? When, without realizing it, you compare them to everything you do? We call it no strings attached, but the brain sees it differently. Because here comes the part no one tells you. You're not immune to your body's chemistry. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, those little invisible demons that activate the moment you touch someone, are both the poison and the cure, the trap that we all fall into. Have you ever wondered why some people stay stuck in relationships that destroy them? Why, after certain encounters, you feel empty instead of satisfied? Why, sometimes, instead of feeling pleasure, you end up feeling a void? Here's the answer. Every time you physically give yourself to someone, you don't just share your body, you share your energy, and that energy doesn't disappear when the night ends. It stays with you, sometimes as a pleasant memory, other times as a ghost that whispers in the dark. Science has already proven it. The brain links sex with attachment, trust, and the feeling of security. But if that bond is broken over and over again, if you get used to connecting and disconnecting without processing it, what do you think happens? What happens is that you fragment yourself. What happens is that every encounter you believe is harmless leaves a small mark, maybe imperceptible at first, but over time these marks accumulate, and one day you wake up and don't know why you feel empty. You don't know why, after so much pleasure, there's only more dissatisfaction. You don't know why you keep searching for something you never find. The truth is, intimacy is more than flesh and bone. It's more than skin on skin. It's an exchange, a fusion of what you are with what the other is. And if you don't understand it, if you don't respect it, you end up losing yourself in the idea that you can play with fire without getting burned. But let me tell you something. There is always a price. And that price isn't immediate. You don't see it coming. It filters into your mind little by little, maybe in the form of distrust, maybe in the form of emptiness, maybe in that strange feeling that something is missing, that something inside you is crumbling. So tell me, how much of yourself have you left in the hands of others without realizing it? How much of your essence has been diluted in nights that promised much but left little? How many times have you confused desire with meaning, attraction with connection? Think about that before saying that intimacy leaves no mark, because I assure you it does, and the more you ignore it, the bigger the shadow it will leave on you. But of course, that's not what they've told you. They've made you believe that sex is just that. An act, an action, something physical with no greater consequences. That you can do it and undo it without anything changing in you, that you can share yourself with anyone, anytime, without something deep within your psyche being altered. And although the idea sounds liberating, it is also a perfectly disguised lie. Because here's the brutal truth. Sex is never just physical. It never has been. It's a bridge, a direct access to the most primitive and vulnerable corners of the human mind. Do you know how dangerous this is? That once you cross that bridge, you can't go back without leaving something behind. Think about it. Every intimate encounter is more than just a passing experience. It's a kind of silent contract. No matter how much you rationalize it, no matter how many times you repeat in your head that it's just for fun, your subconscious doesn't understand verbal agreements. Your subconscious doesn't negotiate. It doesn't separate the physical from the emotional. It doesn't make distinctions between pleasure and attachment. The only thing it knows is that it has shared a moment of maximum vulnerability with someone else. And every time you do that someone stays with you, even if it's in ways you can't see. Maybe that's why, with some people, you feel an immediate connection after intimacy. Maybe that's why, with others, you feel repulsion or emptiness. It's not random. It's your psyche interpreting what you haven't wanted to admit, that the exchange of energy is real, that what you touch, what you feel, what you absorb from the other person, embeds itself in you in ways you don't even understand. And this is what no one wants to tell you. No one explains that every time you share your body, you share your essence. No one warns you that if you do it without consciousness, without intention, you may slowly lose yourself. And the worst part is you won't notice until it's too late. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been with someone and afterward felt that something inside you changed? Maybe an emptiness that wasn't there before, maybe a strange sadness, maybe a feeling of detachment, as if you had left a piece of yourself in a place you'll never be able to recover. That's not a coincidence, because although pleasure is momentary, scars are permanent. Not physical scars, but emotional, psychological ones. You can't see them, but they're there. They accumulate with every fleeting connection. With every night you try to convince yourself it doesn't matter. And one day, when you look back, you'll realize you've given so much of yourself to so many people that you no longer know who you are. Without them. Here comes the truly terrifying part. The way you experience intimacy today shapes how you will view relationships for the rest of your life. Every experience leaves a mark on how you love, how you trust, how you give yourself. And if you keep giving yourself without understanding the weight of what you're doing, without recognizing the invisible consequences, you'll become numb. You'll become incapable of feeling what you once felt. Maybe it's already happened to you. Maybe you've already felt that emotional numbness. Maybe you've already found yourself in situations where you should have felt something, but you didn't feel anything. Where someone looked at you with affection, and instead of responding, you only felt indifference. Where physical contact no longer feels like a connection, but like a transaction. And here's the fucked up part. The more you normalize this disconnection, the harder it will be to go back. Because detachment doesn't activate overnight. It installs itself slowly, like poison, accumulating in such small doses that you don't even realize it's killing something inside of you, until one day, all that's left is an emptiness no one can fill. Think about it. How many times have you tried to fill that emptiness with more of the same? How many times have you believed that the answer is more encounters, more experiences, more distractions? But the curious thing about emptiness is that it never fills from the outside. And the curious thing about intimacy is that the more you seek it, the bigger the hole gets. But of course, it's easier to ignore it. It's easier to convince yourself that everything is fine, that you've got it under control, that you're immune, that none of this applies to you. But tell me something. If all of this were a lie, why do you keep searching for something more? Because after all, there's still a silent longing deep within you. Human beings are not made for disconnection. We weren't designed to exchange bodies without exchanging souls. And even though the modern world tells you otherwise, even though the culture repeats that you can have it all without paying a price, the reality is different. There is always a cost. And if you don't see it now, you will see it later, in the way you relate to others, in the way you trust, in the way you love, or in the way you slowly stop doing so. So, tell me, how many more times are you going to ignore it? How much more will you sacrifice before you realize that the real problem isn't what you're doing, but what it's doing to you? The question you should ask yourself isn't how many more times you'll ignore it, but how far you're willing to go in continuing to pay a price you haven't even calculated. Because here's the key: none of this is free. Everything leaves a bill, even if you don't see it now. And the worst part is, the longer you wait to realize it, the more expensive it becomes. Because think about it. If intimacy were truly insignificant, if it were really just a game with no consequences, why is it so hard to let go of certain people? Why are there encounters that mark you forever? Why do some people leave such a deep mark that even when you want to, you can't forget them? It's not a coincidence. It's not just a whim of the mind. It's because intimacy creates invisible bonds. Bonds that aren't cut with time, distance, or forgetfulness. Bonds that, if you don't manage them consciously, end up becoming shackles. And here's the thing. You can't choose who you connect with at this level. Your brain does it for you. Your subconscious, your emotions, your body, all conspiring to create a connection that goes beyond what you think you control. That's why sometimes you end up attaching yourself to people who aren't good for you. That's why you keep thinking about someone who's no longer around. That's why, even if you swear it meant nothing, something in you keeps coming back to that feeling. And the more you ignore it, the more it will control you. Because the human mind is a battlefield. Every experience is a shot. Every relationship leaves scars. Every night you try to treat as just a moment becomes a file stored deep within your memory. And no matter how much you try to pretend it's not there, in moments of silence and days of loneliness and nights where nothing distracts you, you feel it. You feel the weight of all those unfinished connections, of all those encounters that, even though you tried to treat them as insignificant, left a mark. You feel the fragmentation of a part of yourself that you gave away without realizing it. And here's where the biggest trap comes in. Because the problem isn't just what you've given, it's what you've lost in the process. Every time you share your body without intention, without consciousness, without true connection, something inside of you gets used to superficiality. And when that happens, when you normalize detachment, when you train your brain to see intimacy as just a simple act without value, you begin to lose the ability to feel something real. And that's the real danger. Not that it hurts you, not that it affects you, but that one day it won't. One day you'll look into someone's eyes and feel nothing. One day physical contact won't mean anything to you. One day you'll find yourself surrounded by people with options, with possibilities, but completely empty inside. Because when you normalize detachment, you become immune to love. Not by choice, but by habit. And the more you get used to this, the harder it will be to go back. So, I ask you, how far are you willing to go in continuing to ignore it? How much longer will you keep playing a game where the only piece that really matters is you? Think about this before moving forward, before it's too late. Before one day you look back and realize that you've lost it all, and you don't even know when it happened. If you've made it this far, I want you to do something. Leave a comment with the phrase, "The true price of intimacy isn't seen, it's felt." I want to know how many of you truly understand this, how many of you have felt this truth in your own skin. And if this has resonated with you, subscribe. Not because I said so, but because here we talk about things no one dares to say. And believe me, this is just the beginning. See you in the next video.